Good morning, students. Students, we are doing the chapter light, in which we discussed about the reflection of light, different types of reflection like plane or regular reflection, then diffused reflection or irregular reflection. We also discussed about the characters of image formed by a plane mirror. Now, today I am going to start the topic that is laws of reflection. Students, it has been observed that the reflection of light from a surface always takes place in accordance with two simple rules or laws. We call these two rules or laws as the two laws of reflection. We must, however, first know some terms to understand and explain the two laws of reflection. That means we must know the terms related to the two laws of reflection first to understand the laws of reflection. Important terms are, the first term is the point of incidence and the normal. The point of incidence is that point on the surface of the mirror where the incident ray falls. The point at which the incident ray from any object falls on the surface of the mirror is known as point of incidence. A line perpendicular to the surface at that point, that means at the point of incidence, is known as the normal at the point of incidence. Any line perpendicular to the surface of the mirror is normal, but the line perpendicular to the surface at the point of incidence is known as the normal at the point of incidence. The second one is the incident ray and the reflected ray. The ray of light coming towards the mirror is called the incident ray. The ray of light coming towards the mirror from the object is known as incident ray. Similarly, the ray of light which turns back after reflection from the surface of the mirror is called the reflected ray. The third one is angle of incidence and angle of reflection. The angle between the incident ray and the normal at the point of incidence is known as the angle of incidence. Once again, the angle between the incident ray and the normal at the point of incidence is known as the angle of incidence. Similarly, the angle between the normal and the reflected ray at the point of incidence is called the angle of reflection. Once again, students, the angle between incident ray and the normal at the point of incidence is known as angle of incidence, and the angle between normal and the reflected ray at the point of incidence is called the angle of reflection. Now the next term is the plane of incidence and the plane of reflection. We know that we can use 2 points to define a line and 2 lines to define a plane. The plane defined by the incident ray and the normal at the point of incidence is called the plane of incidence. That means the plane defined by the incident ray and the normal at the point of incidence is called the plane of incidence. Similarly, the plane defined by the reflected ray and the normal at the point of incidence is called the plane of reflection. So students, these are the terms related to laws of reflection. Now I am going to explain what are the laws of reflection. Students, we discussed about the important terms related to reflection, law of reflection. Now we can put together the two laws of reflection which govern the formation of an image by a mirror. The two laws are, the first one, the incident ray, the normal at the point of incidence. Remember it, incident ray, the normal at the point of incidence, and the reflected ray. all lie in the same plane. This is the first law of reflection, that the incident ray, the normal at the point of incidence, and the reflected ray all lie in the same plane. Second law is the angle of incidence and the angle of reflection are equal to each other. We discussed about it, that the angle between incident ray and the normal at the point of incidence is angle of incidence, and the angle between normal and the reflected ray is angle of reflection. And these two, the angle of incidence and the angle of reflection, are equal to each other. This is second law of reflection. And we find we use these laws to understand reflection in all cases and situation. These are the two laws of reflection. Now we will do a small activity to understand, to observe these two laws in practical. To study the relationship between the angle of incidence and angle of reflection, we will do a small activity, and for that we will take a drawing board and keep the plane mirror vertically upright on it near its center. We will hold one cylindrical tube which is made up of cardboard and which has a narrow opening at its front in an inclined position with its front end touching the mirror. We will direct a powerful torch light into the tube, and we will ask one of our friend to hold a second similar cylindrical tube at a matching angle. Now we will move our tube so that it makes different angles with the plane mirror. Now our friend do get the reflected light to come out from the end of second tube. We will see that a circle of reflected light at the end of second tube, provided the second tube is oriented at the correct angle. If the second tube is fixed at the correct angle, we will find that there is a circle of reflected light at the end of second tube. The light will be reflected from the mirror and will move down through the second tube to its end whenever the angle of reflection equals the angle of incidence. However, when a ray of light falls normally on a mirror, it gets reflected in such a way that it retraces its path in the opposite direction. If it means, if the angle of incidence is, that means if the ray of incident ray is normally at the surface of the mirror, then it retraces its path. That means it's follow the path of incidence. The reflected ray follow the path of incident ray. So this is the uh, activity by which we can see that the angle of incidence is always equal to the angle of reflection. We can do this activity using a laser beam also, laser pointer. We can use a laser pointer instead of the torch, and we can see that the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. So students, we did the laws of reflection today. We will do the image formation in a plane mirror tomorrow. So that's all for today. Thank you. Have a nice day.